Hello, hello. Lynn Dalmastro Thompson with Heartfire Healing here. And today I want to talk to you about the topic of why nothing ever goes away until we learn the lesson that we are supposed to get from it. So that's probably a phrase you've heard, right? It's a common thing that we've heard people say of, well, it's not going to go away until you learn the lesson. And you can probably sense that there's a lot of frustration when you hear that message of, oh, you have to learn the lesson for it to go away. And I remember there's been times in my own experience where I've thought, how many lessons do I need to learn? Or why are there so many? Why does it take so long to learn the lesson? And yet that really is the truth of the process of how life works, is that, we have to learn the lessons before something can really go away or before something can really heal, because I'm going to be mostly talking about it from the perspective of our health and our healing. So I want to start with a little bit of a story, and this is a story that's kind of been going on for me for the past couple months and in my own body and in my own body story. So probably about 4 or 5 months ago, I started developing some pain in my mouth. And some of you may have read posts that I've written about this. So I'll kind of keep it a short story. And at first I wasn't sure what was going on. I don't usually have mouth pain, teeth pain, any of that. And one day I woke up and I just had some shooting pain in my mouth. I was like, this is odd. And then it kind of progressed and progressed and progressed. And I started, going to the dentist to get it checked out, just to try and figure out, what was happening, because it felt very strange and I couldn't figure out the cause on my own, and wanted to make sure that everything, structurally was okay. And the dentist said that he thought I had developed a clenching or a grinding habit, which is not something I've had before. And so I was looking at it from that perspective of trying to, resolve that and protect my teeth. But I also am always taking things from the perspective of well, why all of a sudden did I develop this issue? Why all of a sudden am I clenching and grinding and creating all this pain in my mouth? Because some of the days, I have to be honest, it was quite painful. It was probably like a 7 or an 8 at times, and that's just not normal. So why is this happening to me? And the process was going through a lot of layers to figure this out. The layers about learning that I wasn't communicating and expressing my truth and speaking up for myself in certain ways. There were lessons about kind of my relationships with key people in my life. And so, some of the pain would release with that. And, the final lesson that really shifted a lot of things was a part of my story that I hadn't shared before, and a part of my story that feels very vulnerable. And I'm not going to go into that because that's not really the part of what I want to talk about today. But the truth was that this process of trying to resolve the pain was not an easy one. And it took me a while to really learn the lesson of what was going on. And to be transparent, there still is a little bit of occasional pain. So I feel like there's still minor lessons that I'm learning. And in this process, it has been very frustrating at times. I just want the pain to go away, as most of us do when we have pain. Sometimes I'm like, really, another life lesson? Do I really have to go through this? I don't really want to go through this. I've done with life lessons sometimes, is that feeling. And I'm sure, many of you can relate to that. It's like, again, I'm here again. Do I have to do this again? And yet that is really the process of life. We have to learn and keep learning and growing and learning more lessons. And sometimes if we don't learn the lessons when they're kind of simpler or our body doesn't have to be involved, then our body gets involved and it gives us symptoms. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of some of the key components of, when we think about why nothing goes away until we learn the lesson. Well, kind of from a perspective, the problem that we all have, why we get frustrated with this saying of nothing goes away until you learn what we're supposed to learn from it, is because as a society, we've become conditioned to, want Band-Aids, want fast fixes, want things to resolve really quickly and easily, right? And this is not just from the area of health, but in all areas of our life. You know, people want fast weight loss. They want fast solutions to all of their troubles, fast ways to feel happier. Like, we become conditioned, and this may not, you may realize this already, this may be preaching to the choir on this particular point, but we live in a world where we want those fast solutions. We want the fast fixes, the silver bullets, the magic answers. And the truth is, there aren't those things, right? Fast solutions are not out there. They don't exist. There are no magic bullets. There's no just instant fixes to things. So when we're going around through the world and we're thinking, you know, well, I just want a fast solution and I don't want to learn the lesson from this, I don't want to take the time to listen, we're fighting against what our lessons are designed to teach us, or what our experiences are designed to teach us. You know, we're used to also Band-Aids, right? We're used to solutions that just mask a symptom. I think of how many over-the-counter medications exist out there for things like stomach upset or headache or pain. And that is, if you watch TV, right, there's commercial after commercial telling you about, you know, over-the-counter medications and prescription medications. So we are very conditioned to want a Band-Aid solution or a fast fix. And again, Band-Aids don't really work. So we have to really shift our mindset if we haven't already. And this might be something, this particular point that I'm making, you might already have made this shift in your head, but some of you might not. So we have to get out of expecting that there are fast fixes, fast solutions, Band-Aids that are going to work. And we have to realize that real healing takes time and it takes effort and it's a process, and there's no magic thing. Yes, in the case of my dental pain, I could have just gone and said, give me painkillers, and that would have made the pain of the situation kind of go away, but I would have still been grinding my teeth, clenching my teeth, doing damage in my mouth. The pain would still be there underneath, you know, all of the medication. That wouldn't be a real solution. So we have to shift from that mindset of wanting things quickly, easily, speedily, and realize that healing is a process and that it takes time and that there are layers to it. And it's kind of, I use the analogy a lot when I talk to people of onions. So, you know, onions have many, many layers, and healing is a process with many, many layers. And so oftentimes I wind up joking with people. It's like, yep, another layer of the onion. Yep, you got to peel another layer of the onion. Isn't that fun? You know, it's like, why does this onion have so many layers? So really, you know, we have to look for approaches that help us peel the layer of the onion instead of just wanting a fast fix to get to the center of the problem. So the second piece that I wanted to share about kind of this, the problem with this idea that, you know, what if I could just not learn the lesson? What if I could make the problem go away really quickly? Is that we've come to view our symptoms as inconveniences and we don't see their deeper meaning. And this is something I've been talking about a lot lately, but it applies in this particular framework as well. So symptoms, what if you could instead see symptoms as intelligent communication from your body, as messages from your body in the only language that your body has? That's quite a different experience than our typical way of seeing symptoms as, oh, this is annoying, this is frustrating, inconvenient, difficult, challenging. Like, list your negative thoughts here about what you think when you have a symptom. Well, what if instead of just going into that mindset that they're, you know, a problem and they're inconvenient, you could see it as a conversation with your body? And that is a huge mindset shift that I love teaching people, is how to start having that conversation with their body, how to start seeing symptoms differently as communication and as a conversation with their body. So when we learn that language of our body, we can become an active participant in the process. And it's a process of learning how to speak that language. And as you can tell from my story that I started with at the beginning with the dental work, I'm not perfect at it either. And sometimes I require help from someone to help me understand what the body is saying, because sometimes we're so in our own little box, or we have our own little, blinders on, that we can't always see what the meaning of something is, and we need someone to help us decipher what that meaning is. So it's a skill set, and it's something that I definitely teach people, but then there's often a process where we're facilitating that process as well, where I'm helping get that message for people, because sometimes it's very hard to get our own messages. So another thing, when we look at this kind of feeling of wanting something to go away without learning the lesson, how many of you would say that you say, I don't have time to deal with this now? This is a common thing. I've said it at times, like something happens, I don't feel well, I'm having an issue, and it's like, oh, I don't have time to deal with this right now. And so we say to ourselves, I'll get back to this later. I'll deal with this later. But how many times do you actually get back to it later? Usually we don't. We don't kind of make a date with ourselves and say, okay, I said I was going to get back to that later. Let me find a time when I have time to come back to it. We usually just kind of say, oh, I'll get back to it later. And then we ignore it. We forget about it. We prioritize other things. And in that process of not making time for it, and then kind of just saying, okay, I'll deal with it later, I never do, the body actually holds on to that for us, and it remembers. The body remembers what we said we were going to do. And so when we say, I'm going to get back to it later, and we don't, the body still holds on to it. The body still remembers. And oftentimes that's where sometimes we'll have a swelling up of different symptoms, a surfacing of things that are trying to get our attention, and say, hey, you said that you would come back to this later. When is this later ever going to happen? And so wouldn't it be better really to learn to address things as they happen, rather than just kind of keep storing them for the later that never happens? Because when we store them for the later that never happens and we never come back to them, then they start to create problems in our body, and they start to create symptoms that come to the surface. So if you've ever had that experience of the symptom that sometimes comes out of nowhere, and you can't really figure out, I didn't hurt myself, I didn't do anything. Oftentimes that is what is happening, is something is coming up to the surface to be seen and to be attended to, because you said, I will come back to this later. And your body's saying, hey, when's later? Are you ready for later yet? And the more you push it down, and you push it down, and you push it down, and you don't deal with it, and you don't come back to it, oftentimes that's the bigger the problem has to get. So we need to really shift our mindset from saying, I'll get back to it later, which usually is just kind of a way of dismissing it or not prioritizing it, to saying, this is important. And maybe even making time each day or several times a week where you can come back to things that, yes, sometimes we don't have time in the minute. We're dealing with something with our work, or we're dealing with something with our family, and we don't have time to sit down and spend 20 minutes just exploring what's there for us. But we need to find time at some point regularly to come back to those things, and maybe even just noting for ourselves what we're going to come back to. That can be tremendously powerful. So let me know if that really resonates for anybody, that we need to make time for ourselves to come back to that and make that a commitment and a priority for ourselves, because otherwise later just never happens. I'm just looking at my notes. I have one last point I wanted to share about. So I think the other piece about when we don't want to sink into the lesson and learn the lesson fully, or we get frustrated, like another lesson, we're afraid to swim in the deep waters, and they can feel really scary, right? Like sometimes something big comes up, and I know I felt this many times in my own journey, my own experience. Something big and scary comes up, and maybe we'll say, well, we're going to get back to it later, because it's like, oh boy, this one, I don't know, it feels overwhelming. And so we're afraid to come back to those things that are scary and overwhelming, and swim in the deep waters and learn how to navigate that. And yet that is really where the true growth happens in our life is by facing those scary things, those big things. You know, I'm going to be sharing a post a little bit later today about an experience of mine of how when my friend passed away very suddenly the year after I was diagnosed, how it sent me into a very dark place. And that was a place that was very hard for me to go and to find my way through. And I kind of, in certain ways, just put certain things off, and I sunk under the weight of the depression because I didn't have the skill set to swim. So we need to learn how to navigate those deeper areas, those scarier places, because they are also part of our healing journey. It's not, obviously, you probably know this, healing is not always easy. It's not always light. It's not just an easy process. And sometimes we have to go to some really deep and dark places. And we have to learn with our mindset that that is a key part of the growth process. And that's how we get stronger too. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in my own experience is I have gotten stronger through going through these tough times, through going through these challenges and these dark places. You get stronger. You do things that you didn't think you would be able to do. I mean, there are things now that I've done that I never thought that I would be able to do. Like I had certain beliefs about myself and how I saw myself, and I thought I could never do certain things. And yet in this process of going through a healing journey and going through a healing crisis, I had to go to some dark places and some scary places and look at things in a way that I, didn't think I could. And yet you come out the other side and you're stronger and you have more resources and more resilience. And that part of the process, often we're not meant to do it alone. Like if you are dealing with something big and scary and overwhelming and you don't have the skill set, you're not usually meant to do it alone. You're meant to reach out for help, whether that be just help from peers and family, or whether that be help from somebody with a professional skill set who can teach you how to start to tread water in that really deep, dark ocean that you don't know how to swim in. And then you learn how to swim. And once you learn how to swim, it's amazing because you can start transforming that and translating that in how you move forward in life and how you're able to translate that to each challenge that comes subsequently. So it's really about, nothing goes away until we learn the lesson and until we grow into that person that we are meant to become. And we kind of step up and expand in a way into a new part of ourselves. And that is really, I think, kind of the core of why nothing goes away until we learn the lesson, because we have to expand into the new person we're meant to become from that lesson. I am definitely not the same person that I was back before all of this stuff happened in 2004. I'm a much stronger person. I have a lot more skills and resources. And I didn't get there overnight, and I got there with support. So just know that sometimes support is also a necessary part of your journey in this growth and expansion process. So thank you all for taking the time to listen today. If this message really resonated for you and there's somebody else who might need it, I invite you to share the video with them as well. And I look forward to seeing you all here again tomorrow for another live. Have a wonderful rest of your day.